After 30 years of being blind, I received my sight by miracle but decided not to tell my husband about it at first. What I saw my husband of 50 years made me. Dear viewers, before I proceed, please kindly hit on the subscribe button, like and share the story to support us. Your support means the world to me. Now let's dive into the main story. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 72 years old, and for 3 decades, my world had been an unbroken canvas of black. Imagine living in a constant midnight, where memories of color and light slowly fade, replaced by the textured reality of touch, the subtle nuances of sound, and the evocative symphony of scent. That was my existence, a life defined not by what I could see, but by how acutely I perceived everything else. Losing my sight at 42, after a sudden onset of macular degeneration, was a brutal blow. It wasn't just the loss of vision. It was the erosion of independence, the quiet desperation of relying on others, even Arthur, my steadfast husband of 50 years. He was my rock, my guide, my constant companion in the darkness. He never complained, never wavered in his devotion, navigating our small world with a patience that bordered on saintly. We lived in a cozy, slightly cluttered bungalow in a quiet New England town, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and the rhythm of the seasons dictates daily life. Our days were predictable, comforting. Arthur would read the newspaper to me in the mornings, his voice a warm rumble against the rustle of pages. We'd walk in our garden, his arm linked through mine, as he described the blooming roses or the plump tomatoes on the vine. I'd see them through his words, painting vibrant mental images. Evenings were spent listening to old radio dramas or simply sitting in companionable silence, the only sound the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Our life was simple, yes, but it was rich with the tapestry of shared history and profound love. Then came the miracle. It began subtly, a faint shimmer at the edges of my perpetual night, like the distant glimmer of a star just before dawn. I dismissed it at first as a trick of the light, a figment of a long-dormant hope. After all, I'd been told countless times by every specialist that my condition was irreversible. But the shimmer persisted, growing stronger, more defined. It was like a slowly unfolding sunrise, light bleeding into my consciousness, pushing back the oppressive darkness. I remember waking one morning, a Tuesday, the air crisp with the promise of autumn, and seeing a diffused milky white light through my eyelids. It wasn't clear, not yet, but it was there, undeniable. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't tell Arthur immediately. The fear of false hope, of having this fragile new reality snatched away, was too potent. I needed to be sure. Over the next few days, the blurry light sharpened, colors began to emerge. Muted at first like an old photograph, then gaining intensity. It was as if my brain was slowly recalibrating, relearning the language of sight. The world, once a collage of sounds and textures, was beginning to reform itself into shapes and hues. The first clear image I saw was the sunlight streaming through our bedroom window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was a mundane sight, yet it brought tears to my eyes, a silent, profound weeping for 3 decades lost and a future miraculously regained. The decision to keep it secret, even from Arthur, was not born of malice, but of a strange, almost selfish need to process this seismic shift on my own terms. I wanted to see the world again, truly see it, before sharing this overwhelming burden of joy and rediscovery. It was a precious, fragile gift, and I wanted to savor every moment of its unfolding in solitude. I observed, absorbed, reacquainted myself with the familiar lines of our home, the faded floral pattern on the sofa, the way the morning light struck the antique hutch in the dining room. Each object was a revelation, a rediscovery of a forgotten intimacy. I moved tentatively, carefully, pretending to still rely on touch, my fingers tracing the contours of furniture I could now clearly see. The silence of my discovery was deafening, yet exhilarating. I was Eleanor, seeing again, and no one knew. Not yet. My newfound sight, initially a source of silent jubilation, soon became a peculiar burden. It was like carrying a magnificent secret, a vibrant, glowing gem hidden beneath my sweater. Every interaction with Arthur was now tinged with a subtle deception. He would guide my hand to my teacup, and I would pretend to feel for it, even as my eyes clearly registered its precise position on the table. He'd describe the intricate patterns of a bird's nest he'd spotted in the oak tree, and I'd nod, feigning understanding based on his words, all the while seeing the delicate weave of twigs and moss with startling clarity. The irony was palpable. After 30 years of truly needing his assistance, I was now faking my helplessness, an act that felt both necessary and profoundly dishonest. The reason for this charade was complex. Part of it, as I mentioned, was that deep-seated fear of losing this miracle. It felt so fragile, so fleeting that articulating it out loud, making it real, somehow risked shattering it. But there was another, more unsettling component. Over the decades of my blindness, Arthur had become accustomed to a certain dynamic. He was my protector, my guide, my eyes to the world. It had given him a profound purpose, a role he embraced with unwavering dedication. What would happen to that role once I could see? Would he feel less needed, less essential? The thought gnawed at me. Our entire life together had been recalibrated around my blindness. Our routines, our conversations, even the way we moved through our home, were all adaptations to my lack of sight. To suddenly disrupt that equilibrium, to present him with a fully sighted wife, felt like an act of erasure to the life we had so painstakingly built. I began to explore my newly accessible world with a quiet intensity. Our bungalow, once a map of tactile sensations, transformed into a riot of color and detail. I saw the faded floral wallpaper in the hallway, the tiny crack in the antique porcelain vase on the mantelpiece, the way the sunlight illuminated the dust motes swirling in the living room. Mundane details that brought an almost overwhelming wave of emotion. I noticed things about Arthur too, things I hadn't been able to perceive before. The way his brow furrowed in concentration when he was reading, the gentle crinkles around his eyes when he smiled, the subtle silvering at his temples that hadn't been there when I last saw his face clearly, 3 decades ago. He looked older, of course, but his essence, the warmth and kindness in his gaze, was undeniably the same. One afternoon I was in the kitchen, carefully arranging flowers in a vase. A task I'd previously done by feel, now a joy of vibrant hues. Arthur walked in, humming softly, and stopped abruptly. "Eleanor," he said, his voice laced with concern, "you're doing that awfully fast. Are you sure you're not going to prick yourself?" My heart leaped into my throat. I quickly fumbled a stem, feigning clumsiness. "Oh, Arthur dear," I chuckled a little too loudly. "Just getting a feel for them. Still a bit clumsy, I suppose." He came over, his familiar hand gently taking the vase. "Here, let me help you, love." And just like that, the moment passed, the secret preserved. But the incident solidified my fear. He expected me to be blind, to need him. My independence, my reclaimed sight, felt like a betrayal of his devotion. I started taking short walks outside, initially just around our garden, then venturing a little further, always making sure Arthur was occupied inside. The neighborhood, once a collection of familiar sounds, the distant drone of a lawnmower, the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, burst into a visual feast. The vibrant green of the grass, the deep red of Mrs. Henderson's prized rose bushes, the clear blue of the sky stretching endlessly above. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and deeply lonely all at once. I longed to share it, to exclaim to Arthur, "Look! Look at the way the sunlight catches the dew on the spiderweb." But I couldn't. I was trapped between the overwhelming joy of seeing and the silent burden of my decision. The weight of the deception grew heavier with each passing day, casting a shadow over the bright new world I was rediscovering. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this secret could not last forever. The question wasn't if I would tell him, but when, and what the consequences would be. The thought of his reaction, the potential for hurt or confusion, was almost as terrifying as the decades of darkness I had just left behind. The weight of my secret grew heavier with each passing day. It was a constant hum beneath the surface of my interactions with Arthur, a silent, vibrating tension that threatened to unravel me. I found myself becoming acutely aware of every gesture, every nuance in his voice, trying to gauge if he suspected anything. He was as devoted as ever, perhaps even more so. His protectiveness a stark reminder of the lie I was living. When he'd instinctively reach for my hand to guide me across the room, I'd subtly shift my weight, pretending to stumble slightly, allowing him to lead me as he always had. It was exhausting, this constant performance, this ballet of feigned helplessness. My world, now visually vibrant, was ironically becoming smaller. I couldn't freely explore, couldn't spontaneously react to the beauty I saw around me without risking exposure. I yearned to tell him about the way the morning light painted the kitchen in shades of gold and amber, or how the autumn leaves outside our window were a breathtaking symphony of reds, oranges, and golds. Instead, I'd have to feign interest as he described them to me. His voice full of the quiet joy he took in being my eyes. It was a strange reversal of roles. He was narrating the world I could now clearly see, and I was listening, pretending to form mental images from his words. One particularly poignant moment occurred during one of our evening walks. Arthur, his arm linked through mine, was describing the setting sun, painting a vivid picture of the sky ablaze with color. "Eleanor," he mused, his voice soft, "you know, it truly is a magnificent sight tonight. Like God has taken his paintbrush and just spilled all the reds and purples across the canvas." I could see it, the fiery orange bleeding into soft purples and deep blues along the horizon. It was breathtaking. A tear pricked at my eye, not just from the beauty, but from the raw ache of not being able to share my true experience with him. I squeezed his arm, a silent acknowledgement. "That sounds beautiful, Arthur," I murmured, my voice a little rougher than usual. He patted my hand. "It is love. It truly is." The unspoken truth hung between us, a shimmering, invisible veil. The fear of hurting him was paramount. Arthur had built his life around caring for me, around being my anchor in a sightless world. His identity, in many ways, was intertwined with my blindness. To suddenly declare myself whole, fully sighted, felt like it would strip him of that purpose, leaving a gaping void in his carefully constructed reality. Would he feel betrayed by my deception? Would he question our entire past, wondering if I had somehow been less blind than he thought, or if I had been faking it all along? These anxieties spun a relentless web in my mind, trapping me in a cycle of indecision. I began to realize, with a heavy heart, that my secret was not just about me or my fear. It was also, perhaps unconsciously, a way of clinging to the familiar comfort of our established dynamic. Change, even miraculous positive change, is unsettling. For 30 years I had navigated the world blind, and Arthur had navigated it with me. We had a rhythm, a dance, a silent understanding. Breaking that rhythm, introducing such a monumental shift, felt like diving into an unknown abyss. Would our love survive such a radical transformation? Could we find a new way to be together, one where his role was no longer defined by my need for sight? The guilt, too, was a constant companion. Every time he went out of his way to help me, every time he described something in painstaking detail, every time he ensured my safety, I felt a pang of remorse. He deserved to know. He deserved the joy of this miracle as much as I did, perhaps even more so, for all the years he had dedicated to me. But the words remained trapped, lodged somewhere deep in my throat, choked by fear and the complex layers of our shared history. I knew I couldn't carry this burden indefinitely. The pressure was building, like a storm brewing on the horizon, threatening to break. I just didn't know when or how the dam would finally burst. The internal conflict continued to rage, my mind a battlefield between the joy of sight and the dread of disclosure. Every morning, I would wake up with a renewed resolve to tell Arthur, only for that resolve to crumble by lunchtime under the weight of my fears. It felt like living on a precarious cliff edge, constantly teetering on the brink of revelation. I started to notice small things that reinforced my apprehension. Arthur's meticulous care in guiding me over a loose rug. His quiet pride when he described a particularly vibrant sunset. His gentle touch as he placed my hand on his arm. These acts of devotion, once a comfort, now felt like shackles, binding me to my deception. The strain of maintaining the pretense began to manifest physically. I found myself sleeping less, my dreams a chaotic swirl of vibrant images and silent accusations. I lost my appetite, the taste of food dulled by the bitter tang of guilt. Arthur, ever observant, noticed. "Eleanor, my love, you seem a little withdrawn lately," he remarked one evening. His voice laced with concern as he sat beside me on the sofa. "Is everything all right? Are you feeling unwell?" My heart hammered. This was my chance, the perfect opening. The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue, bubbling up from the well of my anguish. "Can see, Arthur. Can see everything." But the fear clamped down, a cold, unyielding vice. "Oh, just a bit tired, darling," I managed, forcing a weak smile. "The change in weather, perhaps." He nodded, accepting my flimsy excuse, and I hated myself for it. The longing to share this miracle, this rebirth, became almost unbearable. I wanted to exclaim, to point, to grab his hand and pull him towards the window to marvel at the intricate dance of snowflakes falling outside, something I had only ever known through his descriptions. I saw the quiet beauty in his aging face, the profound kindness etched in the lines around his eyes, the gentle curve of his lips when he was lost in thought. These were details I hadn't seen in 30 years, and they filled me with an overwhelming tenderness that made the deception feel even more cruel. He was still the Arthur I loved, the man who had unflinchingly stood by me through decades of darkness, and I was denying him the simple joy of sharing my light. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room, ostensibly listening to the radio but actually gazing intently at the antique clock on the mantelpiece, I heard Arthur's voice from the kitchen. He was on the phone, his tone hushed, a rare occurrence. My ears, sharpened by years of relying on sound, strained to pick up his words. "Yes, Dr. Miller," he was saying. "I'm just worried about Eleanor. She seems a little down, not her usual self. No new symptoms. Just a general malaise. I just want to make sure she's all right." A wave of shame washed over me. He was worried, genuinely worried, and all because I was too afraid to be honest. He was still looking out for me, still shouldering the burden of my well-being, even when I no longer needed him to. That moment was a turning point. Hearing his concern, his simple, unwavering love, pierced through my carefully constructed walls of fear and guilt. My secret was no longer just about me. It was actively causing him distress. It was unfair, deeply unfair, to the man who had given me so much. The idea of him calling a doctor, fretting over my imaginary illness, twisted something inside me. It was time. The exact words still eluded me, but the decision was firm. I would tell him. I spent the next few days rehearsing conversations in my head, trying to find the perfect way to break the news. Would I simply blurt it out? "Arthur, I can see." Or would I ease into it, hinting at changes, preparing him? The thought of his reaction, the potential shock, the possible hurt, still terrified me. But the alternative, continuing this lonely charade, allowing his worry to fester, was no longer an option. The light that had returned to my eyes had also illuminated the dark corners of my own selfishness. I had to face the truth not just for my sake but for ours. The secret was a poison, slowly eroding the very foundation of trust that our 50 years together had been built upon. I owed him the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. The morning I decided to tell Arthur dawned crisp and clear, the kind of New England day that usually filled me with quiet contentment. Today, however, it brought only a tightening in my chest. I watched him from the kitchen, as he meticulously prepared our breakfast, the familiar sounds of clinking dishes and the gentle sizzle of bacon filling the air. His back was to me, his shoulders slightly stooped with age, and a wave of profound love, tinged with regret, washed over me. This was my moment. There would be no more excuses, no more delaying the inevitable. He brought my plate to the table, placing it carefully in front of me, guiding my hand to the fork. It was a gesture he had performed thousands of times over the years, a silent testament to his unwavering care. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging me on. I took a deep breath, the scent of coffee and bacon filling my lungs, grounding me. "Arthur," I began, my voice a little shaky, "there's something I need to tell you." He paused, a piece of toast halfway to his mouth, and looked at me, his brow furrowing slightly with concern. "What is it, love? Are you feeling worse?" His immediate worry for me was almost unbearable. I shook my head, my gaze unwavering from his kind, familiar face. "No, Arthur. I'm not feeling worse. In fact," I paused, gathering every ounce of courage I possessed, "I'm feeling better than I have in 30 years. He put the toast down slowly, his eyes searching mine. "Better? How so, Eleanor?" There was a hint of confusion in his voice, a faint ripple of unease. I took another breath, the words finally tumbling out, haltingly at first, then with increasing urgency. "Arthur, the light. It came back. Few weeks ago. Gradually at first, and now. Now I can see. I can truly see, Arthur." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the distant tick of the grandfather clock. Arthur sat perfectly still, his eyes wide, unblinking, fixed on my face. His usually warm complexion had paled, and his lips were slightly parted. For a long moment he said nothing, and a terrible fear gripped me. Had I broken him? Had my secret shattered the man I loved? Then slowly, a tremor started in his hand, causing his coffee cup to rattle softly against the saucer. A single tear, then another, traced a path down his weathered cheek. But it wasn't a tear of anger or betrayal, not yet. It was a tear of profound, overwhelming emotion. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. You can see." I nodded, tears now streaming down my own face. "Yes, Arthur. Can see you. I can see everything." My gaze swept over his beloved face, taking in every detail. The silver threads in his hair, the faint freckles on his nose, the incredible depth of his blue eyes, now shining with unshed tears. "You look exactly as I remembered you, but even more wonderful." He reached across the table, his trembling hand covering mine. "My God, Eleanor," he breathed, the words heavy with disbelief and joy. "My God." His grip tightened, a mixture of wonder and immense relief radiating from him. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The question was gentle, curious, not accusatory, and my heart swelled with gratitude. I explained, faltering slightly as I laid bare my fears. The fear of false hope, of breaking our established rhythm, of making him feel unneeded. I spoke of the overwhelming nature of the miracle, the need to process it on my own, and most importantly, my deepest fear of somehow diminishing his role in our lives. As I spoke, his expression softened further, understanding dawning in his eyes. When I finished, he squeezed my hand again, then reached out and gently cupped my cheek. "Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "my beautiful Eleanor, do you truly believe there is anything that could make you unneeded to me? My purpose, my love, has always been to be by your side through everything. Whether you could see or not, that never changed. The only thing that mattered was your well-being, your happiness." He pulled me into a tight embrace, and for the first time in 3 decades, I truly saw his hug, felt the solid warmth of his body against mine, no longer imagining it in the dark. We held each other for a long time, the silence now filled not with deception, but with a profound comfort of shared truth, renewed love, and a miracle finally, fully embraced. The weight of the world lifted from my shoulders, replaced by the exhilarating lightness of being truly seen, in every sense of the word, by the man I loved more than life itself.